v'nismekabach, Maher ahub, kiva moed, v'chonenu ki me'olam. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, 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 la 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 la, la 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 la, la la la, la 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 la. Yada la 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 la, yada la la la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la. Yada la 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 la, yada la la la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la, yada la 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 la. So those are our warm-ups, and as we launch into the formal part of the Kabbalat Shabbat, the opening main section of Friday evening, I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, those who are here, those who are online, and I hope that this is an enjoyable service to help get us into the prayerful mood that we need for the coming high holidays. And on page 11, we will begin Psalm 95, and then we'll do a little bit of English in here. Nari al-Tzuri Sheinu, Nikarma Pana Betorah, Izmirod Nari alo, Nikarma Pana Betorah, Izmirod Nari alo, Kiel Gadol Adonai, Umelech Gadol al Kol Elohim, Asher biyado mechkarei haaretz v'toachot harim lo. Asher biyado mechkarei haaretz v'toachot harim lo. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Great is Adonai, a greater sovereign than all other deities. God's hands formed the earth's deep. Mountain crests too are God's work. Sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai, who formed us. For Adonai is our God, and we are God's flock, sheep in God's caring hands. Arbaim shana kut bedor va'omar amdo ere b'veim behem lo yada udrachai asher nishbari be'api im yavoun hel manukati. Page 13, Psalm 96. Shir Adonai Shir Kadash, Shir Adonai Kol Haaretz, Shir Adonai Baruch Hu Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuato. Another nature psalm, page 13 on the left. Sing to Adonai a new song. Sing to Adonai all the earth. Sing to Adonai, praise God's name. Day after day, tell of God's deliverance. Tell the nations of God's glory. Speak of God's wonders among all peoples. For Adonai is great, surely to be praised, more revered than any other gods. For those gods of the nations are mere man-made idols, but Adonai fashioned the very heavens. Grandeur and glory are God's honor guard, strength and joy where God is found. Offer to Adonai, peoples of the world, offer to Adonai strength and honor. Offer to Adonai the honor due God's name, and bring a gift of thanksgiving when you enter God's presence. The second half of page 14. Yismechu hashamayim b'degayel ha'aretz, yir'am hayam u'melo ya'aloz tzadai v'kol asher bo, az yeranenu kol atzei ya'ar, Ifnei Adonai giva lishpot haaretz, Yishpot tevel b'tzedek ve'amim be'emunato. And Psalm 97, another one on God's majesty. Adonai malachta gelares yismechu im rabim anan barafel saviv tzedek mishpat mechon kiso. Adonai reigns, let the earth be glad, the many distant lands rejoice. Clouds and thick darkness surround the divine, righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about. Flashes of lightning illumine the land. The earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax at the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the master of all the earth. The heavens tell of God's righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory. Worshippers of idols should be shamed for praising false gods. All that is deemed supreme should bow before God. Zion hears of it and rejoices. The cities of Judah exult, as you, Adonai, pass judgment. For you, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that people worship as divine. O have Adonai sin urash omer nafsho chasidav miyad rishayim yatzileim. Or zaru ala tzadiko yishrei lev simcha simchu tzadikim baronai. Behodu lezecher kodsho. And Psalm 98, a little bit shorter. Shiru Adonai, Shir Kadash, Ki Nivlod Asa, Hoshi Alo Yamino, Uzroa Kodsho. We're on 17. Sing to Adonai a new song, for Adonai has wrought wonders. God's right hand and holy arm have brought deliverance. Adonai declared deliverance. As nations looked on, God's righteousness was revealed. God dealt faithfully and kindly with the house of people of Israel. The very ends of the earth saw God's saving power. Call out to Adonai, all the earth. Break out in joyful singing. Sing to Adonai to the music of the lyre. Lyre and voices making music together with horns and shofar cries. Trumpet the presence of the sovereign Adonai. Let the sea and all that is in it roar. Earth and all that inhabit it thunder. Let rivers clap hands, the mountains sing in harmony, greeting Adonai who comes to judge the earth, judging the world with justice and the nations with truth. Yer am hayam umrode vel be yosheba narodim kaukavi yakadarim yiranenu libne Adonai gibalis pot haaretz ishpot tevel v'tzedek yamim b'meisharim. And finally, Psalm 99, pages 19 and 20. Adonai malach yirgazu amim yoshev grubim tanu ta'aretz Adonai v'tzion gadol v'ram al kol amim. Adonai reigns, nations tremble. The one enthroned amidst the cherubim makes the world quake. Adonai is great in Zion above all nations. They shall acknowledge your name, saying, Great, awe-inspiring, Holy One. And a sovereign strength lies in the love of justice. You forged the paths of truth, judging Jacob righteously and justly. Therefore exalt Adonai our God. Bow down before God, the Holy One. Adonai Eloheinu Adonidam El Nosea Yidolem Noke Malalilodam Roma Mu Adonai Eloheinu Bishtakavula Arkocho Kigadosh Adonai Eloheinu. And on 21, we have a masterful nature psalm. The melody we'll try tonight is a Spanish-Portuguese one. This is Psalm 29. Mizmor le David, Havud Adonai b'nei Elim, Havud Adonai kavod va'oz, Havud Adonai kavod shemo, Tishakavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh. Kol Adonai al hamayim el hakavod yirim. Adonai al hamayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach. Kol Adonai behadar. Kol Adonai shober arazim. Vaishaber Adonai et arzei halabanon. Vayarkideim kemo egel. Levanon v'sirion kemo venreimim. Kol Adonai chotzev lahavorish. Kol Adonai yachil midbar. Yachil Adonai midbar kadesh. Kol Adonai yicholel layalot. Vayachasov ye'arot. Ufeichalo kulo omer kavod. Kulo omer kavod. Adonai lamabul yashav. Vayeshev Adonai melech leolam. Adonai ozli amo yitain. Adonai yivarek adamo v'shalom. And on page 23 through 25, we have Lechadodi. And it has become quite a tradition in the American Jewish community to see how many different melodies you can use for the 9 verses. We'll try to hold ourselves to just a couple. So, we'll start with something nice and traditional on 23. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. Shamor zachor v'dibur echad, ishmianu el hamiyuchad. Adonai echad u'shmo echad, Hashem u'diveret v'li tehila. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. Likrat Shabbat lehu v'nelecha, ki mekor ha'baracha. Made rosh mikedem nesucha, sof maaseh b'machshava techila. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. Mikdash melech melucha, kumitzai mitocha hapika. Rav lachshevet b'yemek havacha, uyachamol aleichem la. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. So on 24, let's do the middle verses with one that is done in our conservative camp system. Hitorari me'afar kumi, livshi bigdei pardecha ahal yad ben yishai beit alachmi, korva el nafshi ge'ala. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. Eat odri, kiva odre, kumi odri, udri, shir davere, kavod Adonai alai iknigla. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. Lechadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat negabela. And we'll finish it off with a couple different Hasidic melodies. Lo, te, vo, shiva, lo, ti, kal, mi, ma, ti, so, umatehemi bach. Bach yechasu aniye ammi benivnata ir aldila lecharodi likrat kalla pene Shabbat nekabbelam. Page 25. Hayu l'shimsa shosaich v'racha kukol mivalayich yasis alayich Elohai kimsos chatan kala lechadoidi likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela yamindu smol tifrotzi v'et Adonai ta'aritzi al yaris ben parsi ben ismeka ben agila lekaraidi ikrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. We rise and we greet the spirit of Shabbat as she comes right through the back doors of the sanctuary or of your homes. Boi b'shalom aderet bala gam b'simcha u'v'tzola toch emunei am segula. We bow to the left. Boi chala to the right. Boi chala lecharodi likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. And if anyone is in mourning, this is where they would be greeted. Amakom yenachem etchem b'toch shara v'leit Zion b'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among all other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. So, believe it or not, everything that we just got through doing is only 500 years old as part of the Friday night service. I mean, obviously, the Psalms are at least 2,000 years old, but they weren't assigned until 500 years ago by a group in the Safat, in the Kabbalists in northern Israel. However, Psalm 92 says right in its very tip top that ever since the days of the temple, this is the Sabbath Song. So, what I think we're going to do with this tonight is we're going to start out with some English, and then we'll switch at the end to a 19th century beautiful choral melody, just singing one line. But I'll introduce it with just that first line that says it's a song for the Sabbath day. Mizmor shir, leyom hashabbat. Mizmor shir, leyom hashabbat. It is good to thank you, Adonai, to sing to your name, Most High, proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night. Finger the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up. You gladden me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork. How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs. The arrogant do not understand, the fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms, only to be destroyed forever. But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. We're on page 28. As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, anointed with fresh oil. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear that the righteous flourish like the date palm. They thrive like the tall cedars of Lebanon. They are planted in the house of Adonai, and they flourish in God's courtyards. Arik karamar yifrach, keres balvanon yiske, sherulim bebeit Adonai, bechasrod Eloheinu yafrichu. Od yenubun beseva, Yeshainim bera'ananim yiyu, Hagid ki yashar Adonai, Suri, velo avlatabo. And the Psalm for Friday is the one that's on page 29. That also is from the days of the temple. So, the way they set this up on page 29 on the left, there's lots for you all to read. So now that we have a few more of you, how about if I will read the straight type and you all nice and loud read the responses in the italics. Adonai is sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm, not to be dislodged. From earliest time, you, God, were enthroned, for you are eternal. In your house, beautiful in its holiness, your testimonies endure, Adonai, for all time. Mikol lahot maim rabim adirim mishbereyam adir bamarom Adonai erodecha ne'menu miod leviteka nava kodesh Adonai leorech yamim. So we won't do Kaddish and we won't do Baruch, but the structure of what's coming up is we have creation prayer, and then a prayer about Revelation, and then the biggest revelation of them all, except for the Ten Commandments, namely the Shema. And then after the Shema, we will have redemption and a prayer for peace at night. So let us use the more traditional of the two page 39s. I'll set the tone. You'll see how this is the second main section of the service is going to sound different. A little more quiet. So I'll start it and then we'll switch over to the English. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidbaro ma'ariv arabim, b'chochma poteach she'arim, v'tvuna mishaneh etim, machaliv et hazmanim zader b'ragia, b'mishmerotehem, b'ragia kirtzono. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, whose word brings on the evening dusk, whose wisdom opens the gates of dawn, understanding changes the day's divisions. God's will sets the succession of seasons and arranges the very stars in their places in the sky. God creates day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, making day pass into night and distinguishing day from night. Uma'avir yom u'mevid layla, umavdil ben yom u'ben layla, Adonai tzavot shemo, El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai hamariv arabim. And on page 40, we have a congregational melody that will take care of all of that Hebrew. This is talking about God showing God's love for us by giving us the gifts of the Torah and the commandments. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael amachavta Torah mitzvot chukim umishparim oranu limareta al gein Adonai Eloheinu zogveinu v'kumeinu nasiach bechukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed ki heim chayenu v'yorech yameinu v'yorech yameinu u'bahem nehegei yomam v'layla yomam v'layla ve'ahavatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. On page 41, we have the first paragraph of the Shema. Some people follow the custom of just kind of shading your eyes a little bit. We're not closing them, hiding our eyes, but just so that we can concentrate just on the Shema, especially on that word echad, which means there's only one God. So please join me, 41. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod. And Torah trope, since this comes from Deuteronomy, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'kol lebavcha v'kol nafshecha v'kol meodecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha. For me, Nushinandam levanecha v'dibarta bam. V'sivtecha b'beitecha v'lachtecha v'derech u'shochbecha u'kumecha u'gshardam le'od al yadecha v'ayu le'roravo b'neinecha u'kravdam amazuzod beitecha u'visharecha. We'll do the middle paragraph to ourselves. This was actually in a recent Torah reading. And we'll rejoin in the bottom of 42 for the third paragraph. Okay, let's rejoin with Torah trope on the bottom of 42. This is talking about the thread we call tzitzit on the fringes of our garments. We'll do this a little more slowly so that people can chant along. Vayomer Adonai al Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta aleim, v'yasud lahem tzitzit, al kanfei bigdehem ledorotam, v'natenu al tzitzit hagana b'dil dechelet, v'haya lachem letzitzit, Ur-item odo, uzkartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, va'asitem odam, v'lo taturu, acharei levavchem, v'acharei einechem, asher adem zonim achareihem, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen. So I said that we were going to have redemption coming up after the Shema. And here it is on page 43a. So this one's not set up responsibly, but you're welcome to join me. I'll read at a reasonable pace, and you are welcome to, since it's in the plural, you are welcome to join me with the reading. This is our enduring affirmation, binding on us, that Adonai is our God, there is none other. We, Israel, are God's people. God is our sovereign, redeeming us from earthly rulers, delivering us from the hand of tyrants, bringing judgment upon our oppressors and just retribution upon all our mortal enemies. We're on 43a. Performing wonders beyond understanding, marvels beyond reckoning. God places us among the living, not allowing our steps to falter, and leads us past the false altars of our enemies, exalting us above all those who hate us. Adonai avenged us with miracles before Pharaoh, offering signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. God smote Egypt's firstborn, brought Israel from its midst to lasting freedom, led them through the divided water of the Sea of Reeds. As their pursuers and enemies drowned in the depths, God's children beheld the power of the divine. They praised and acknowledged God's name, as we will with Mi Chamocha, but let me bring it in with a little nusach. That's what you call this chanting of the prayers that I'm doing here. Hamavir bana ben gizrei amsu, rotveim be'erchasonehem bitomot tiba, rauva nagavurato shibechu vodu lishmo. And on 44 is another line of that, and then we will join with Michamocha. Umalchuto beratzon gibelu alehem, Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael alechanu shira b'simcha rabah. V'yameru kulam mi kamocha v'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, norad hilot o seifele. Malchutecha rauvanecha bokei ayam livnei Moshe, Zeilianu v'yameru Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. V'nemar giver Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad chazak mimenu. Baruch ad Adonai kol Yisrael. And on 45, we have one of my favorite prayers in the whole Friday evening service, asking God to watch over us at night. Give you just a little taste of a beautiful, gentle Hebrew melody for it, and then we'll switch back over to the English. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom. V'ha'amirenu malkeinu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, v'tagneinu beitz adova milefanecha, v'hoshienu Lema'an shemecha. If you'd like to join me on the left-hand side of this, So allow us, Adonai, our God, to sleep peacefully. Awaken us to life, O sovereign. Spread over us your canopy of peace. Restore us with your good counsel, and save us for the sake of your name. Shield us. Remove from us enemies, pestilence, swords, starvation, and sorrow. Remove evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you, God, watch over and deliver us. You, God, are sovereign, merciful, and compassionate. Ensure our going out and coming in for life and for peace, now and forever. Ushmor tzeiteinu vo'enu l'chaim u'shalom me'ata be'ad olam ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha. Baruch atah Adonai, aporeis sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. And on 46, talking about quiet and gentle melodies, which are particularly appropriate for Shabbat, I would like to share with you all one more time a melody that actually was written by someone very famous. And I'll sing it slowly enough. If you'd like to try to sing it along, you're welcome. There's transliteration if anybody were to need it on the left-hand side of 46. But I think this one really gets the spirit of Shabbat. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asor et ha-Shabbat d'ororam berit olam b'nei u'bein b'nei Yisrael ot Hileolam, Isheshet Yamim Asaronai, Erashamayim, Yeretz, Uvayom Hashavi, Shabbat vayinavash uvayom hashavi Shabbat vayinavash. It's almost like a lullaby. And with that, let us do our Amida to ourselves. It is 47 through 52. We rise for this, and we will rejoin after we have had a chance to do some private prayer. So if you are done with your prayers, on page 52, let's do a nice, gentle version of Oseh Shalom. This one may not be as familiar as the one that came out of Israel, but it's probably even more Shabbatic. Oseh Shalom, Shalom bimromav, Hu ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom, Shalom bimromav, Hu ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. So, without a minion, there is only one part of the stuff after the Amida we can do. On top of 53, here is the seventh day of creation. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Vaychulu hashamayim b'haaretz v'chol tzevam. Vaychal Elohim bayom hashvi malakto asher asa. Vayishbot bayom hashvi mikol malakto asher asa. Vayvarek Elohim et yom hashvi vaykaresh oto. Ki bo shavar mikol malakto asher barak Elohim la'asot. So before we move to Aleinu, let's talk a little bit about tomorrow's Torah reading. So what I like to do is to give an overview of some of the subjects and then to pick just one to give a little hint about on the Friday night. Please come back tomorrow if you would like to learn about some of the other parts. So it starts very, very well-known phrase, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. And after I give you the overview, I'll give you a little bit of a hint about what that might be all about. Then the next part, the consequences, not so nice consequences of worshiping pagan idols, although it's going to get worse later in Deuteronomy. But very, very interesting limitations on the role and on the conduct of kings. They're not allowed to have huge harems. They're not allowed to have enormous bunches of horses and, just use them like their playthings. Then we talk about the fact that the Levites are not a landed clergy. They had had their belly full of that with the landed clergy running Egypt. And they did not want any landed clergy in the Promised Land. And so the Levites just got cities, but the sacrifices are what fed them. Speaking of cities, this is another time we're talking about the 3 cities of refuge on each side of the Jordan that are equally spaced, so that if, in American law, we differentiate between murder and manslaughter. Manslaughter is involuntary. You weren't particularly planning on killing somebody. Well, the example used in the Jewish texts is if you're chopping wood and the head flies off the axe and, knocks somebody on the head, then you can't be charged with murder. But if the family of the person that died from the flying axe head wants to pursue you and kill you in retribution, nonetheless, there are cities of refuge a day's run away where you could go and hide from the revenge of the families. Then something I'm chanting tomorrow in the Torah reading, which is some incredibly far-seeking, forward-looking laws about who shouldn't actually fight in an army. That's all I'm going to say. Come back tomorrow if you can and find out what 3,000 years ago they had already figured out about who actually should not be allowed to be a soldier. It's really interesting. And another thing I'm going to talk about in tomorrow's sermon is Bal Tashchit. When you are besieging a city, you can cut down the pine trees around it to make your siege works, but you are not allowed to cut down the fruit trees. Very early shades of environmentalism. And then the thing winds up with a whole blood guilt mishmash, which is very complicated. So I said that I would say a little bit more about why we have tzedek repeated, tirdof. You should actually, it's interesting, they're in the same Torah portion. A rodef is the person who chases after the guy who committed either the crime or the murder or the manslaughter, whatever it was. That's a rodef. The exact same word is used at the beginning of the Torah portion, tzedek tirdof. You should race after justice. You should pursue it as much as you pursue any other aspect of life. So, what might be a reason for having two words for tzedek tirdof? One is that we need to abide by justice, whether, if we bring a case, whether we win or lose. We need to have a good enough, pure enough judiciary system that we can accept a negative verdict. And a medieval commentator said another reason for having a second justice is that it should be the life goal of every responsible citizen to help pursue justice in their community their entire life. So it's not just for, the young and the strong. The second word tzedek is for us older folks who also have the responsibility, even at our age, to pursue justice. So maybe a little bit more about that tomorrow, but there will be some other interesting things to talk about tomorrow. One thing I am going to do that I actually wrote a prayer for the Ukraine kerfuffle. It's not a kerfuffle, it's a horror story. Before I retired, the synagogue that I was in read Torah on Friday night, and so this was the point at which we would have read the Torah, and I would share this prayer. God, who watches over us all, please watch over the people of the Ukraine as they continue to deal with the Russian invasion. Please keep the remaining Ukrainian Jewish community safe from this attack. Give strength to the defenders of the Ukraine. Watch over the innocent who suffer the most, and help the world to understand they must support the weak against the strong, whenever and wherever there is aggression. The prayer I'm going to read at this point in this much longer service tomorrow was actually written by a Ukrainian rabbi at the turn of the 1800s, and it has been in every single conservative prayer book in the 20th and now 21st centuries. So come back tomorrow if you'd like to find out which of all our prayers actually was written by a Ukrainian rabbi. Okay. Let's see. I believe, do you have the custom of doing Mish Shaberach on Friday night? Just to be safe, let me at least list the names of the people for whom we will chant Mishbeach tomorrow. I think it's built into the Torah service. Helen Byrne, Carrie McKinney, Marjorie Allen, Charles Miller, Marcia Orange, Leon Capuno, Virginia Madden, Tina Bullard Rivera, Roberta Rivera, Lynn Schulwolf, Baruch Ben Elisheva, Christy Ann Martinez, Kay Bull, Jean Meisler, Diane Barber, Jeff Caldwell, Margaret Caldwell, Benjamin Ben Miriam, Susie Berman, Ray Lobato Jr., Lloyd Moy, Maddie Raminga, Iris Badrivka, Becca Martinez, Mary Savko, Marlon Barnes, Isaac Ben Yosef, Zoe Martinez, Tara Bach Yosef, Nikki Decker, Daniel Ben Kaba, Josie Lobato, Teresa Lobato, Kooni Marcia Price, Leroy Martinez, Phyllis Carson, Art Sandick, Buddy Lobato, Malka Amster, and Alberta Parker. And we will get to the Yorksites pretty soon, but first let's rise for Aleinu. And I will switch cameras here so that I can open the ark. Okay. We're on page 56. Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latei kedula liyoser bereshit, shlo asanu kagoyei haratzot, lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shlo sam chelkeinu kahem, gora aleinu kakol amonam, anachnu korim, mishachavim umorim, libnei melech malchei hamalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Norei Shamayim Yosei Haaretz, Moshe Bikaro B'Shamayim Imal, Shkina Ruzo, V'Govei Meromim, Hu Eloheinu, Ein Od, Med Malkeinu, Efes Zulado, Kagadu Vidurado, Vidatayom, Vashabodai Elalevavecha, Ki Adonai Hu Elohim, Vashamayim Miyama'al, Yal Haaretz, Midachat, Ein Od Al Kain Yomochut Shalecha Hiro Meadim Lok Begavod, Kagaru Vidoradecha Adonaim Lok Leolam Vaed, V'nemar Vayadonai Melech Al Kol Haaretz, Vayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad, Ushmo Echad. We remain standing for our list of yahrzeit names. Let's see, are we allowed to do Kaddish if we don't have? Oh no, we're supposed to replace it with Psalm 23. Okay. So the names for this week's yahrzeit are Morris Byrne, Perry Smith, Pauline Cohen-Witt, Jacob Kilberg, Elise Salama, Dorothy Levenstein Siegel, Mottel Blunfeld, Julius Kassover, Ruby Feinstein, Arthur Greenberg, Max Michelson, Judith London Evans, Joseph Gross, Sarah Ann Lipman, and Marilyn Rosen. Sorry for the echo there. All right, and we can find Psalm 23 on 337. Okay. Got it. Let's read it together. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God lays me down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, renews my life, guides me in right paths, for that is God's way. Though I walk through a valley as dark as death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table before me in the full view of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup is overflowing. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Please be seated. We have a couple of announcements, I believe. Well, I'll be back in the morning, and we'll have Havdalah tomorrow night, the Alabama Havdalah group. Monday, Minyan with breakfast at 7:15. Oh, by the way, Havdalah is still at 8 o'clock. Thursday also at 7:15 in the morning. And next Friday night, I will actually be back here with Rabbi, and there's going to be a Chinese dinner at 5, and services at 6, and make sure you make your reservations. So that takes care of our announcements. And with that, let's finish up, unless anybody has anything else that needs to be announced. We're good? Okay, 62. I'll be just a little bit over. So here's a nice bouncy melody for Yigdal. Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach Nimtza v'yenei al metziuto Echad v'yen yachid k'yichudo Nedam v'gam ein sof le'yaktuto Ein lo demut aguf ein o guf Lo na'aroch elav kedushato Kadmon l'kol davar asher nivra Rishon v'yein reshit l'reshito hino adon olam V'kol no tzar yoreh gedulato umalchuto shefa nevuato nidano Elan se segulato v'tifarto Lo kam b'Yisrael gemoshe od navi umabit et temunato Torah met nadan le'amo el al yad nevi o ne'man beito lo yachalifael velo yamir daro le'olamim l'zulato tzofe v'yodea sidarenu mabit l'sotavar b'kadmaro gomel ish keset k'mifalo No rein l'rashara k'risharo Yishlach l'ketz yamin meshichenu Livdod mechakeketz yeshuato Meitim yechayael berochasto Baruch adei Hashem tehilato Meitim yechayael berochasto Baruch adei Shem tehilato. Shabbat shalom, y'all. Shabbat shalom to everyone online and in person. And may you have a wonderful, restful Shabbat. I hope to see many of you back here or back online tomorrow morning. And we'll find out more about that Torah reading. So, I believe we meet out there for Kiddush. All right. Let me undo so I can come back there and chant a Kiddush.